Hey, wonderful people, and welcome back to the Silver Coin
Hey,
Podcast, Episode 3. As always, you're joined by me, Gal, and my brother Lan. Today, we're talking about the lore of the game and the world itself.
yeah, indeed we are. So today we are going to hop into it, checking a bit what actually thematically wise is holding the game together because we know many different types of games. I guess there are as many types of games as there are stars in the sky, if we kid a bit. But in general, some games are more abstract in its nature than other games more rely on their team throughout the game, and we definitely can be part of the latter group, which means that Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters is definitely heavily connected with the lore. And it does play its part because it's important that you immerse yourself in this world. It's not just about doing the most optimal moves, pushing the cubes, point salad stuff or whatever. It's not that. Although it's a Euro game in its essence, as we talked in the previous episode, it is definitely not just an abstract game with a bunch of mechanics. The team is very heavily involved into it, and we have spent and are going to spend a lot of time with the lore of the game, helping you picture this world we are actually playing in. And with that said, maybe a question for you, Gal. When you think about the game
Yeah.
and you have to describe the setting, what is the setting that you are thrown into when you start the game? What is the setting for you personally?
So basically, we play in a role of a monster hunter, right? So, and we are thrown into the world that is plagued by multiple monsters, and basically, many cities are giving us contracts to basically cleanse those cities and help the local populace, right? By clearing those monsters, and we ultimately earn the rewards by doing so, right? So basically, what we're doing in this game is trying to build our character, build our, learn magic, learn knowledge, learn about the world itself to basically fight the monsters more easily, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's the gist of it. You could almost say it's a cliche type of setting. But now let us take a deep dive into what is actually happening and what makes also the lore and stuff happening a bit different than the concept from the other games. And you're totally right. Of course, we are the monster hunters and whatnot, but it all starts in this land of Atosia. We call the great continent that we are playing on the continent of Atosia. It's not the only continent, and the lore implies there are others. And there's a lot of Easter eggs and whatever thrown into the entire thing. But basically, we are only seeing a part of this continent, at least the part where the story and the game is happening. There are 6 kingdoms on the map, on this giant world map. Um, and those 6 kingdoms, they all have their own monarchs, which are ruling the land. And long ago, or not that long ago, like 80 years ago, like a calamity happened. And you see this quite often with games and so on, because why this is important is because usually you do not want to have a narrative where it's like everything was fine in the world of blah blah blah, and then nothing happened and then you start the game. No, no, no. Usually it's like everything was fine, something happened, now you're here, or something that is why you are the center of action and why you're playing in this time of period that you are. We are actually playing 80 years after that calamity has happened, and the calamity itself is described in a kind of vague sense. It was basically diseases started spreading. Monsters started to appear in a bigger quantities because monsters were already part of this land before. And now you do not know why exactly, but the lore is giving you small bits and pieces to connect all of it together like a puzzle. And when we are talking about the lore of the game, we can say there are several types of lore. We have the general lore, the general premise of the game that is written in the rule book and is going to be written in the accompanied material. Then we also have the lore of the kingdoms themselves. Each kingdom has its own preset lore. Then you have the lore of the characters themselves. Then you have the lore connected with the monsters, and the final bit to the puzzle are the short stories, which are also basically filling in the missing pieces and so on. And they are not supposed to give you the entire picture and all the answers. They're supposed to basically give you an idea of what is happening, and then filling some of those last blanks on your own. Because if you are really listening to the lore, reading the lore, and so on, you may be able to connect those dots. And there are several dots to be connected. And that's how we wanted to do it. So that when you are playing a character, that you can, for those of you for which this is important, that you can basically dive more deeply into those type of things and immerse yourself into the action. So yeah. And with that said, Gal, maybe you can take us through just in general. We already talked about the general premise of what was happening and so on.
Yeah.
But maybe if you can tell us a bit about the kingdoms, the 6 kingdoms, and maybe also tell us your personal favorite lore of the kingdom.
So basically, as Lance said, there are 6 kingdoms. The first being Morahan, the biggest kingdom of them all. Then we have Lis Blanc, we have Fabula, we have Avaris, we have Jorvik, and we have Oldemort, right? And these 6 kingdoms in the world, they're kind of represented with 6 different colors. And each kingdom also has its own lore, its own history behind it, right? So if you look at the Morahan, for example, which is the biggest, it is mostly made of deserts, so it's the southmost kingdom. And this is also where the calamity happened through the lore, right? And this is why there are certain orders, certain clans that actually, kind of started there. For example, Natural Chaos Order, which is one of the characters, is from that clan, from that order. So yeah, and for example, Lis Blanc is the richest kingdom out of them all. It is named after White Lily. Lis Blanc is White Lily in French, and most of its cities are French and named after flowers. And yeah. Each kingdom is special in its own regard. It has its own special lore, and also the cities are named after the premise of that lore. So, for example, Fabula is like more mythology based, and the main city, the capital city, Mantigern, basically started because one of the basically the founder of that city was the story behind it was.
Don't say it. What the founder was. It's for them to find out.
It's for them to find out. But yeah, it's basically very mythology-like. It's legend-like, and it's very mysterious kingdom. And for example, Avaris is the kingdom of time, the kingdom of there are a lot of magicians, I guess, or they were very heavily.
What do you want to say? Probably. Let's do a big back tracing. Let's say it like this: each of the kingdoms has its own culture and past and so on, and you can find out the stories and so on about each kingdom, and maybe we mention one of those today. But basically, if we go to the north, we have Oldemort. The symbol of the kingdom is a crown. And if you see the culture of Oldemort just by reading the names, you would guess that it's rightfully right that it's kind of a Nordic-like culture. Actually, to give you design glimpses of how we did it, is we actually use a lot of Norwegian, Icelandic, and so on based names when naming those things. And Oldemor and Oldefar, which is actually the name of the capital. So Oldemor is the name of the kingdom, and Oldefar is the name of the capital. And Oldemor in Nordic language would mean actually great grandmother, and Oldefar a great grandfather. And there is a reason why those the capital and the kingdom is named like that, and it's explained in the lore of the kingdom. Then we go south, we go to the Jorvik, which is heavily influenced by the Britannic English lore and what was happening in UK, nowadays UK, in the past with the Vikings invasions and stuff like that. So it's actually taken from the real life situations that were happening in our world and then twisted a bit accordingly and so on. So that's also interesting, especially for those history buffs that know their history. They can find those connections there. And the culture itself is more Germanic, Slavic-like in terms of names and stuff happening. Of course, there are not Germanic, Slavic people and so on, because this is a fantasy realm. So of course, there is no Germanic, Slavic people, but the feeling that we try to portray and also connect the people that are playing to is there, because in the end, it's not the people from the fantasy that are playing this game, but the people from our world. And those people are from the Nordics, from Germanic lands, from Slavic lands, and so on. So each can find their own piece of the puzzle in the entire lore. Then when we go southwest, we have the Fabula, pre-mentioned Fabula. And Fabula is a Latin Greco-Roman type of culture. And a lot of it is connected with that. And then we go to the east, like Gal has mentioned. We have the Lisbon, which is actually has a symbol of white lily, the medieval symbol of lily that you can see bunch in the different middle age graphics and visuals. And basically everything there is French, and a lot is connected with the flowers. And the more you look into the lore, you can see how obsessed those people are with the flowers and beauty and stuff like that. And then you go to the south, to the pre-mentioned Abaris, the Yellow Kingdom, and they are more Mesopotamian. You have names like Gilgamesh and so on. And probably again people know about the Epic of Gilgamesh and so on. So we wanted to have a tribute to that. And the further south, as pre-mentioned, was Morahan, which has a capital of Göbekli Tepe. And those, again, who know what is happening in the world and how, for instance, the archaeological digs are going and so on, know that the Göbekli Tepe is extremely important for our understanding of where the civilization started and so on. So the Göbekli Tepe was taken from that part of the world, from Turkey, to basically name the capital from that. But other than that, most of the names are like Egyptian-like in origin and so on. So yeah, that's kind of the entire thematic connection culture-wise there for those 6 kingdoms. But now going back to you, Gal, which is your favorite, like lore-wise, just lore-wise, which is your favorite out of 6?
I mean, each of them has its own unique and fun lore to read, actually. But my personal favorite, I guess, would be Oldemor, because it was actually, if you read the lore, it was consisted of a lot of small kingdoms which were constantly fighting each other, and basically the one who basically kind of, ruled them all.
Who
won the war and basically
to rule them all.
Joined with all of them and basically made the kingdom of Oldemor. Was, I don't know how the kingdom itself was called, but the others called it Oldemor, which is basically great grandmother, as you said, and basically also the capital city was also named after it, so the great grandfather. So and why this is my personal favorite is because it actually reminds me of China in the ancient times, right? Because like 200 years BC, the China was also divided in small kingdoms basically, And
Small, yeah,
and
small, but yeah.
basically 7 kingdoms who were left behind, so who basically stayed, were constantly fighting, and they were called the warring kingdoms, right? And basically the king actually kind of decided the king, I think it's called king, decided to basically try to rule them all and to stop the fighting between them, to stop the 500 years of the warring.
Unification of China.
The unification of China. To unify them basically. And this is what it reminds me when I talk about and when I see the lore of Voldemort, and that's why I find it personally the most interesting.
I see. So yeah, that's about the kingdoms and so on. And on our web page, we are currently updating the situation, and you will soon, in a couple of weeks, be able to find a bunch of lore information, and also the map where you can actually see where some of the things mentioned are located. But basically, you will be able to read those lores of the 6 kingdoms, and also the other types of lore we are going to basically upload on the website. And moving on from the kingdoms and so on, if we go to the characters, so you already mentioned that the characters themselves are basically presenting different, you could say, classes in a way, but definitely most of them are part of a certain group, and they are unique. They all have their own names, but on the cards themselves they are like, they will have a title like a fighter, which is a class, but then the lore will go more into deep detail what the fighter, for instance, she is about, that she comes from Lisbon, that she is a part of this mercenary order, and why she is doing what she is doing. And all of them have this one thing in common, which is basically that they are the monster hunters, and more or less they are not doing it for the
fame.
Some justice purpose or whatever. They are doing it for the coins, which is, I think, far more realistic than most of the fantasy would want you to believe, when the heroes are doing things just because they're good, and they don't like bad things happening to other people. I mean, not most of the people are willing to risk their lives for such a valiant purpose, even less doing it in such a horrendous way and fashion as the monster hunters do. And I think it's only logical that it would be far more realistic that those people are actually doing it for the coins, and then they can have other motivations next to them, and the lore explains that, and goes into detail about that, and each character is different in that sense. But definitely we are not playing some good guys that are coming here to clean up the mess. We are actually trying to portray real people, real characters, thrown into the situation, trying to make best of it, to serve their own purpose also, and meanwhile maybe serve the community as well, right? Or other kingdoms in this sense. So what would you, for instance, maybe have to say about the characters, their lore, and how that is done, and how that's connected maybe to the type of characters that we have, and so on?
As you mentioned, I really find it interesting because the setting is a lot different than it normally is, right? Because the monster hunters do not do it for reputation, for fame. Of course, the reputation helps, and in our game this is also connected because they can earn more money if they're more famous in this sense, but they're generally doing it for money. And this is also how it connects with the classes. As you mentioned, we do not have a fighter named Gal there, who is a very renowned hero there. No, there is just a class, right? We have a fighter, we have a shapeshifter, and these classes are actually represented by a specific type of a specific member of the clan. For example, a fighter, in this sense a woman, she was actually a mercenary in Lisbon, right? And why we have her as part of the monster hunters is because she decided to ultimately leave all that behind and become a monster hunter. and she ultimately does it for money, right? And all of those monster hunters do it for money, and this is why
Coins.
for coins.
Yeah, but money is coins.
Yeah, it is basically the same. But yeah, what I want to say is that each character has its own lore and why they decided to basically join the monster hunting scene, and everyone mostly do it because of the coins, right, as we mentioned. And this is interesting. And if we look at some of the characters, they're also very unique in their sense, because each, as I said, represents their own order, their own style of fighting, their own style of how they are. So for example, Shapeshifter is again someone who basically has a unique ability, but decided to basically try to earn money with monster hunting. And I find that personally very interesting, because it's a different kind of setting. We are not heroes, we're doing it for money.
She's definitely, and what is important is, like, she's not the only shapeshifter out there. There are like others, but she's our protagonist or whatever that decided to use her ability to also go and hunt for monsters and make some coins along the way. When we come to actually to the title of the game, Silver Coin, and the logo, Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters, and the logo connected with the silver coin with the monster inside of it and so on, that's actually the reason why we have the title, is that because it's all about the coins, and in the end the purpose of the game is to gather the most coins, which actually translate into victory points. And victory points in this sense basically are the coins, that's why that's the reason why we did it the way we did. That's all we can say for now about the characters and the lore for the characters, because we are quickly again going through time. We can move on maybe to the next type of lore, and that's basically the short stories. Or rather, before that, we can jump quickly to the monsters themselves. So the monsters in Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters, they also are quite unique, different in the way they do certain things and so on. But then they also have their own lore and how that is connected with their abilities and weaknesses and whatever. And we have basically 30 of them. Maybe a few words about that, Gal.
So one thing is that basically when the calamity struck, like 80 years ago, as we mentioned, basically a lot of people turned into monsters. So that's why a lot of monsters are humanoid, right? Like type of humanoid creatures. So for example, for a certain spider might have a female or a male characteristics, which kind of reminds you of a human, right? And this kind of mutations started to happen, and a lot of different monsters started to kind of spread and plague the lands. And we have 3 types of monsters in the game, divided by difficulty, so 1 through 3, and basically each is the level 3 monster is a bit stronger than a level 2, and the level 2 is stronger than 1. But what I want to say about it is that those monsters are also more devastating, and why they're more devastating is because, for example, level 3 monsters have their own territories, and basically they're kind of calamities themselves, and that's why they're also worth more coins in the sense. But each monster is also unique, and another interesting thing is that we tried to kind of represent them by having weaknesses and having strengths. So for example, there are spirit monsters that can only be fought with the spirit magic, and this is also something that can remind you of Witcher, because this game is inspired by Witcher, but we tried to kind of make it thematic wise, so that the strengths and the weakness of the monsters represent the monsters themselves. So if the certain monsters hunts during the night, it is logical that it is going to be stronger during the night, and maybe in the summer or during the daylight they're going to be weaker in this sense. And This is basically how we tried to connect and basically represent each monster with the lore and its behavior, right? In this sense.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, you said Witcher. To be frank, in that sense, we can go back and say, I don't know, that was also from the Ghostbusters or whatever, or some other type of lore. Like it's basically just that you need some type of magic to basically be able to interact with the ethereal type of creature.
For example,
And that's what spirit magic is, right? It enables you to do that, but it's not the only way that you can interact with them. There are other mechanics that allow you to do that, but definitely. Here, when it comes to the lore of the monsters, again, the story and what is actually happening and what is actually very important in this world and is a big mystery in itself is the so-called flow. We have this thing that we call flow that is basically ever present and is one of the resources. If we go back to the game and connection with the game, flow is actually one of the resources within the game. There are two types of flow: magical and physical flow, but both of them are ever present and all around us in a sense. And then there are certain instances when the amount of the flow will increase, and that's what actually happened that 80 years ago in that calamity. The amount of flow, especially in certain regions, started to increase dramatically, and with it the mutations started to increase dramatically. And basically, when it comes to monsters, you said it well. There are three groups of monsters, you can say, in that sense. But you have the spiritual monsters. You have the more animalistic monsters and more humanoid ones. But actually, that's connected with that. So basically, if there was the animal was affected by the flow, the animal started mutating to, so that eventually it became something more grotesque, something more menacing. And on the other hand, there were humans who mutated because of certain reasons and so on, and they became monsters themselves in another way, shape, or form. And then the flow was affecting also that other realm, the ethereal, the spiritual realm, that is also ever present there. And so a lot of things in the lore are connected with the flow, and the monster lore shows this really well. So yeah. And moving on, so we actually have time to talk about other things before we wrap this up. It's the short stories and that are basically in between, that are connecting the things. What is the purpose of those? How do you see them? Like now, I'm not speaking to you like the one that's going to give us the ultimate answer. How do you see those short stories, and do you value them? Why do you value them? Do you like them? What is the purpose of those?
Yeah, I actually like them really much because they're kind of, not connected to any of the characters, any of the monsters, any of the kingdoms, but they can mention some of them. So they're like a random story happening to a certain guy living in Morahan, who decided to travel to the sea and to, like look at the landscape and stuff. And during that story, a lot of things can be mentioned, and if you read or listen closely, you're gonna see a lot of things that you can basically connect to the other stories and to the other lore we have in the world. Or for example, one short story that we already posted was that one specific person tried to learn about the Alu, who is one of the ethereal, like you said, ghost creatures. And he tried to learn that through by going to the certain temple in the Fabula, and learn that there, and basically other types of, not Easter eggs, but basically parts of the lore can be mentioned there. And what I like the most about them is that they're not specifically focused around certain things. So for example, they're not specifically focused around a monster called Alu, but they can mention this monster, and they are like a random thing that's happening around the world, which can give you glimpses and additional information which can be useful and very intriguing in their own sense.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, it's basically a tool for us to do the world building, right? Through every bit of lore, we are actually doing the world building, and there is so much of world there to build, so much of locations to visit, so much of things to mention that are ever present in the game, like from the magic that you learn from kingdom knowledge, what is that about, to these different classes, types of characters, right, that you are playing, and so on and so on. And there is just not enough time to basically do it all. And there is also not a purpose to do it all, because we also want to, leave some of it out there for the imagination, because I think that's very important if you want to build an interesting world, and also to give us the future options about what we can do with this world in the future. But those short stories are basically helping us build the world. They help us shift the focus from the main characters that you're playing, and focus on a totally outskirts area, talking about what makes that area special, what is happening there, talking a bit about the things like you previously mentioned, about certain monsters, about certain types of magic, about rituals and things that are happening, conventions that are happening, and why they're happening, and why that is important to the world of Atoisia, and so on and so on. And yeah, I always loved those in the stories, because even when you finished reading a book or whatever, what I loved also was that there was this giant world to explore, and it was not just about this book, but there was so much more out there, and that makes you think a lot about those things, that makes you look at the map a lot, that makes you want to read more material about it. I loved it every single time that I did it, and I want to use this opportunity that we are doing this, to also do that, right? So I think that's why those things are important, to help you increase the immersion further on. And with that said, do you have any doubts that thematically wise, theme is very important to this game? Gal, what would you say to the people asking you, is this a heavily thematic game, and why is it not, for instance, a narrative driven game? What makes it different? Why did we decide to go in a different direction, and why not use a narrative to even focus on this particular story that we want to tell, and so on?
So with the lore and the history and the theme that we have, we could easily go to the narrative type of a game, as you said. But actually why we decided not to was because there are so many amazing games that we already played which are basically narrative based, and ours could be like that. But basically what we felt was missing in this type of board games, adventure type board games, was the replayability. Because, for example, Tainted Grail, which I admire very much, is basically a narrative game and a cooperative game, which means that you basically need the same group of people and play it a multiple of times to basically advance that story and basically see through the game to the end. But we tried to basically make a game where each game is in its own setting, and each game is basically can be played within an hour, 2 hours, or something like that. And basically you can end it and play it again with less players, with more players, with different players, with different characters if you want. So yeah, that was basically the idea behind that. And yes, as you said, it is a very heavy themed game. And this also can be seen through the mechanics of the game. This is also probably the last thing I wanted to mention, is that a lot of the mechanics are connected to the theme itself, right? So for example, as you said, flow is one of the resources, right? And you can say that it is an abstract resource, but it is not. As you said, the flow is like, think of it as energy or something like that. The flow is ever present, and basically you can focus on basically harvesting and this flow to basically have it more, and with having the more flow, you can basically perform more abilities, for example magic or physical abilities or something like that. And this is, everything is thematically connected, right? Also the things you're doing, for example, when we mentioned in the previous episode, the preparation phase is very thematically connected to the game, because as you can say that it is some could say that it is abstract because you're just drawing cards and you're basically playing cards, like collecting sets and playing these sets down. But it is more than that, right? Because if you're playing the experience set, so for example 3 cards with experience symbols and basically gaining experience in that sense, thematically that means that the time you spend traveling, you basically focused on getting experience in, for example, training in the martial arts, or basically fighting, or everything you can, which helps you gain experience in this sense. Maybe I kind of said it a bit convoluted,
but you said it well. It's the everything you do in a turn, we want it to be in some sense, way, shape, or form connected thematically. So you do the preparation phase, you already mentioned that. Then you do the actions, you do the move. You move, right? You move physically on the map, not just from a location A to location B. That is an abstract location or whatever, or no, you're physically moving through this giant map, like point by point, traveling through different cities and so on, through different marshes, or whatever, mountain passes, whatever. But then the weather is affecting that, and you can move more or less depending on the weather, and maybe you potentially can lose some of the physical flow or even health or whatever when you're doing that, because it takes more stress on your body when the weather is bad and so on. Then you do the location action, which is abstract in itself, but what are you doing there? Where you're learning magic. And how do you learn magic? You need experience for that, to learn the magic, and then how to use the magic in battles. You need to have magical flow, so you need to transfer that magical flow into those special abilities on the magic cards, and so on and so on. And when all is wrapped and the round finishes, you actually go to the next month on the calendar track. So it's not just round 1, round 2, round 3. It's actually, you have the calendar and you move 1 month, 2nd month, 3rd month, so you can see how the passage of time is done, and how the day cycle changes. Of course, each month it cannot be just the day, night, and so on, but then we tried to incorporate that sense of preparation when you're hunting the monsters, and certain monsters are stronger at night and so on. And to do that, you need a mechanic of day cycles, time of day cycle, which is full moon, night time, or just daytime. And then you basically have this immersion of what is actually happening, where are you traveling, where are you going, how much time has passed, and so on and so on. And that is very important, I think, when you're doing a game like this, because I think that the game, mechanically wise, is strong enough to basically be in a way devoid of theme, but I think that connecting it with the theme, with this visual map and so on, makes it that much more enjoyable. And I think that theme is very, very, or extremely important to this game. And the lore that we are talking about today is extremely important to help you bring that theme to life. And yeah, that's the gist of it, I think.
Yeah, so with that, basically, we can conclude this episode. I think we were short enough in this sense to help. I hope mostly that we helped you immerse in the world of Atoisia, in the world of Silvercoin, Age of Monster Hunters, and that basically when you're going to be playing the game, you will be feeling a lot more, enjoyment.
Go explore the world, go explore the lore. If you are those type of people, and mostly people who play this type of games are like that, so there will be plenty of lore for you guys to explore. We are going to shower you with that lore, and then also, depending on the crowdfunding and how that goes, we can build on that, not just through words and so on, but also visually and so on. So yeah, uh, I think that we pretty much said what we wanted to. It took some time for us to get this episode out because we were doing a lot of stuff connected with the project. But nevertheless, it is here now for those of you who follow, and there is more of you each day. And thanks a bunch for listening to this rambling. I hope that for some of you this is interesting enough, and go explore our webpage, go explore the things that you didn't know about this world of Silvercoin, Age of Monster Hunters. And like I said, about 2 weeks from now, you should be seeing plenty of lore on our website. We are in the process of updating. We are doing other stuff in the meanwhile. We are still quite some time from the crowdfunding, and even to ASAN. But basically, in 2 weeks' time, you should be seeing a lot of lore there.
Yeah. So thanks again, and bye. See you next time.
Bye bye.